Oscar Wilde said, "We are all in the mud, but some of us are looking at the stars." Oscar Wilde, 113 years ago, the world lost the great and multi-talented Oscar Wilde, poet, novelist, playwright, and critic. Wilde died prematurely at the age of 46 from meningitis, destitute and alone in Paris. The novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, challenged Victorian morality and even landed him in prison. It is still his best-known work, The Picture of Dorian Gray, The Portrait of Dorian Gray, published in 1891. In July 1890, Lippincott's Philadelphia magazine featured the story of a man who never ages, but in contrast to his flawless appearance, the portrait bears the signs of wear and tear. In London, the newspaper Daily Chronicle characterized the story as unclean, poisonous, and full of suffocating odors of moral and spiritual decay. St. James' Gazette deemed it filthy and disgusting, while suggesting that the author be prosecuted. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. More ominous was a brief report in the Scots Observer, which stated that although Dorian Gray was a work of high literary quality, it dealt with matters which, quote, matters which only concern the CID or in the camera hearing, and quote, as well as that it would be of interest mainly to outlaw gentry and perverted telegram carrying boys, and quote, an allusion to the then recent Cleveland Street scandal over a men's brothel in London. The books which the world calls immoral are the books which show the world its own obscenity. 5 years later, May 25th, 1895, Wilde faced a conviction for committing indecent acts with certain men. The uproar that ensued is not surprising. No work of mainstream English language fiction had come so close to openly expressing homosexual desire. The first few pages leave little doubt that Basil Hallward, the painter of the portrait of Dorian Gray, is in love with his subject, and once Dorian discovers his godlike powers, he commits various heinous acts, including murder. But to Victorian sensibilities, his most unspeakable heinous act would have been to corrupt young men. We are all in the mud, but some of us are looking at the stars. At the trials against Oscar Wilde in 1895, opposing lawyers read aloud passages from Dorian Gray, calling it a sodomite book. Wilde was imprisoned not because he romantically loved young men, but because he showed this desire, and Dorian Gray became the dominant exhibit of his shamelessness for the society of the time. The worst thing about bigots is the honesty. Oscar Wilde died November 30th, 1900, in a shady hotel in Paris, age 46. Almost overnight, a legend was born. Wilde, the martyr to homosexuality, Wilde, the moral rebel. The nascent gay right movement embraced him as a scorned hero. And it's sad to think about, but genius lasts longer than beauty. When Greg Rodwell in 1967 opened a bookstore, LGBTQ bookstore in New York, he called it the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop. And after the Stonewall riots in 1969, Rodwell used the bookstore's mailing list to help organize the first Pride Parade. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives an imitation, their passion a reference. To the world I seem, by my own intention, an amateur artist and a mere dandy. It is not wise to show one's heart to the world, Wilde once wrote. So we shouldn't assume that his soul was revealed to us when he became an icon or when he was normalized in wider circles as the father of be yourself, quote unquote. Only shallow people don't judge by appearances. The real mystery of the world is the visible, not the invisible. Wilde's aestheticism, his fanatical worship of beauty, was perhaps the deepest and most abiding of his passions. Perhaps only the threat of persecution prevented him from freely expressing his own sexuality in his work. The ugly ending of Dorian Gray, which stabs his portrait in the paroxysm shows a man losing the battle with his public image. This is from Alex Roth, How Oscar Wilde Painted Over Dorian Gray, The New Yorker, August 8, 2011. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.